You're like a little jungle boy.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was just out there, Mowgli running around. Where did he even get this loincloth? He's always
I've
drawn
been
with that.
wondering the same thing. I'm so happy you brought it up so I didn't have to. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Joyspiracy Theory. My name's Basil, and I'm very excited that you're here. I've been waiting all day for you guys to get here. We've got a wonderful interview this week with a nice young boy, Nicolai. Well, he's a young man, not a young boy. And we had a great conversation, and you guys are gonna love it. It's awesome. He's a pastor who's all into the old fringy stuff, and we talk about that and why it's not more prevalent in the church and all these things and sort of what happens behind the scenes, but also a bunch of other great stuff. So stick around. This week's episode is sponsored by Bernie, the Bernese Mountain Dog, and he sponsored the show through Patreon, through his human resource, Jennifer. So thank you very much, Jennifer, for that. And Bernie, thank you for your generous support. And if you guys have a furry friend who wants to sponsor the show, you can go to patreon.com/thejoyspiracy theory. It's the only reason we're going. It's how we keep the lights on over here. Without them, we would have no lights. All right. And thank you for everybody who has supported the Patreon. Now, here's something I mentioned on another episode, and that is that I'm going to start putting bonus content up. For those who are Patreon supporters, you'll get a private link to plug into your RSS podcatcher. That's your podcast listening app, whichever one you use. You can plug in this RSS feed, and you'll get bonus content. And I don't know if I can say this, but I have an awesome bonus material lined up. Actually, I'm just going to say it. So everybody knows my partner, Gons. We do Canary Cry Radio together as well as Canary Cry News. And he just had a little baby girl. And, I got to say, I've known Gons for a lot of years, and I've never seen him like this. He's so happy. He's not grumpy. It's gross. Nah, I'm just kidding. So I'm very happy for him, and if you sign up for the Patreon to support this show, you'll get access to the bonus conversation that I had with Gons about having a baby, how it's changed his life, how it's changed everything, and, a lot of you out there have babies, but many of you don't. But if you like Gons, this is definitely going to be something you want to do. Okay, now, let's get into the episode. Here we go.
Hello?
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
Hey, how you doing?
There you are. Is this Nicolai?
This is I.
Okay,
This is me.
Is that your code name for this evening?
Yeah, that's my code name for my entire life.
Okay, that was your birth code name.
It is.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on the show today, buddy. First of all, what are you thankful for?
Oh man, I even knew you were going to ask this question. Thankful for the gospel and for the one who sent it. I know that's always a given, but
what a good answer.
Yeah, it's a good way to start. Yeah, the coming kingdom.
Hey, there you go. Switching it up a little bit. Look at you, creative guy. Yeah, it's funny. I'm always surprised by, I've just started kind of talking to listeners such as yourself on the show, and I'm always surprised when they don't have just like a grateful answer just ready to go in the chamber. But you picked it up good. You did a good job.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Well, this is cool. This is great, man. So we're I don't know. Now I was just gonna explain to the audience, but by now they've heard a couple episodes. We're talking to cool, real peeps. None of these fake fringe celebrities. But I didn't mean to call them fake. Hey, everybody out there, please come on my other shows. You're not fake. You're still cool. But yeah, no, I'm excited. Now, here's a fun fact. For those people out there, you actually helped me go to a conference recently.
Oh yeah, that's right. I almost
Yeah.
forgot.
Yeah. No, it was real cool. But Gons and I, we go to conferences. Not so much lately, but we do it. It's what we do. It's part of our deal. But I didn't have a ticket to the. Oh shoot, what was it? It was the
It was in
Rocky
yeah,
Mountain
yeah, it
thing.
was the Rocky Mountain Conference.
There it is.
Yeah.
And you sacrificed for me,
I
so I
I
could
did.
attend.
It was not as much of a sacrifice. That's when my brother-in-law decided to get married. Was that
Oh,
weekend? So
so it was your
yeah,
wedding gift to me
it was.
for his
Yes,
wedding.
congratulations.
Well, I
Yeah.
appreciate that. I was had a good time. I laid low, was pretty incognito the whole time, but unfortunately, when I speak, that's when people start to recognize me. So, what's up to those
You have a very
people?
distinct voice.
I know. So, what's up to those people who I met at the conference? It's cool. All
Now,
right.
what you may not know is I actually met you kind of at another conference that was even before that.
Did you incognito meet me at a different conference?
I did. I even
Oh my gosh.
gave you my code name.
The hunter has become the hunted.
Get that. You were dressed like someone from Duck Dynasty.
Oh, that was a fun one. Yeah.
Yeah, and you may or may not have released a different view on the Mark of the Beast.
Oh, you were even sitting in our live performance?
I was
Dude, you're old school.
totally old school. I
Well,
even have the T-shirt.
well, this is going to be fun. I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, that live performance went horribly, but I'm glad you were there.
I was highly entertained. Me, my wife, my brother, we were sitting in the very, very back. So we brought our very, very young child, and I was dying the whole time. I thought it was great.
Well, I'm glad you liked it. It was really, for those of you, it's actually an episode you can listen to on Canary Cry Radio. We did a live episode at a conference, and we had this projector shining right on us, like on our faces and also on the screen behind us. So we couldn't see anybody. But just the saddest thing, every once in a while, we'd see like the doors open and people walk out. Like we are actively losing audience. This is not good. But I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I did. I had a lot of fun.
I also got in trouble at that conference because, yeah, I was wearing a fake beard and an American flag bandana and a white suit. And some leaders of the conference didn't think I was taking it seriously enough. So I
Because the
lost.
white suit is pretty formal.
You exactly.
So
I was taking it more serious than anybody.
yeah.
But I lost my emceeing job after the first day. But anyways, enough about me. So tell me about yourself. Tell me, you don't have to give away all your personal information on the internet, but I'm curious. Where are you from? What's your worldview over there?
Well, that's a great question. I currently live in Northern California. I am currently a pastor,
Ooh,
but I am not a every Sunday morning speaking pastor. I'm
you're
I guess a lay pastor.
an associate,
I suppose that's a good word for it.
an associate
So I don't
pastor.
teach regularly on a Sunday morning, but I'm one of the pastors at church.
Uh-huh.
That's what I'm currently doing. Got a wife, 3 girls. The dog's a boy though, so that's good. Um,
So wait a second. So okay, so you listened to the Kelsey episode,
I did, yeah.
and you are that pastor, right?
That's me.
That's
That's
you.
me.
Not you're the one who started bringing up the Nephilim in Bible studies.
When the text brings it up, you can't skip it.
Whoa, this is like full circle, buddy. This is awesome. This is like some listeners' minds are going to start exploding out there. So that's cool. That's awesome. She has moved now, but you're still there, kind of in the same area.
Still there? Yep.
All right. So now, just to get it out there, do you make this a normal practice in your Bible studies? I guarantee you might get some people wanting to come to your Bible studies.
Honestly, we don't necessarily try to bring it up, but honestly, going through the text, I've been looking into this stuff for a really, really long time. I was the the oddball maverick at Bible college and seminary.
You bad boy.
I would ask the question and then sheepishly put my hand back down, and just the weird stuff.
Yeah, asking about like angels mating with humans and what giants are and stuff.
Yeah, totally. So it's not something that we purposely do. Although one summer we did.
Did you put on a little conference, a little church?
What we did was we actually had the whole summer, 'cause, summer and people are gone, and you don't always have all your regular folks around. So what we did instead for the whole summer for Bible study, we did just a Q&A time. People just send me questions, and then we would do the best we could to try to navigate through it. I'd point them to different resources and stuff. And so that time we did. We purposely did because that's what people would ask about. So
yeah. That's awesome. I was at a church for a while. It was a big mega church, and they did sort of the same thing, but it was just the Holy Spirit. They're like, we're going to have a special night, this one special night where you can ask questions about the Holy Spirit. I'm like, that is really weird. Because I come from a more, I don't know, not like hitting people with your jacket on stage, like Pentecostal charismatic tradition, but Holy Spirit, he's like, he's the third wheel, but we're riding a tricycle, so it's
right.
Like,
he's kind of necessary, and he's there. You have flag team at that church?
Oh yeah, I certainly not at the mega church, but I am very familiar with the flag team.
Okay, all right,
yeah,
awesome.
Serious business.
Yeah.
Okay. So cool. You're the. I gotta say, I get so many questions. We are on the brink of starting a database of pastors who are like on the level with kind of the fringe Christian Bible prophecy stuff, because so many people ask us like, "Where's a church where I can go?" and they talk about this stuff, or at least I can ask questions without being shunned. Oh, my cat says hi.
Hey, Monty.
Yeah. So I mean, I feel like you're doing your own personal life mission, even if it's not your life's mission. That's a pastor who's willing to talk about the Nephilim is like kind of a rare resource.
See, I always found it odd when you would hit one of those passages and you wouldn't talk about it.
Yeah.
And just when I was younger, I still am, but not younger, but I'm still interested in apologetics, and I would do a lot of research and stuff in that realm, and I would hear these testimonies from people who would come out of the Watchtower Society, out of the JWs, and a lot of it started with just a very honest conversation with a believer, or sometimes just them reading the Bible. And they would go to their leaders and they would ask a question, and they would either say, "We don't talk about that," or "Don't ask that question," or they would basically get stonewalled in some way.
Right.
And that led that person to really start looking into it, and the Lord would capture them, would break down those walls.
Right.
And so it's so interesting how that's happening in the church, but it's not. it's actually pulling people away from Christ.
Yeah.
Because of the nature of what we talk about, and definitely the stuff that's on a lot of these podcasts, fringe Christianity sort of thing. People, if they have no guidance, if they are asking people who aren't going to point them to Jesus, they're going to get it's a tsunami of trickery from the enemy. It really is.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah, I mean, we've said it before, but the mega church me and Gons were going to, they read over Genesis 6, and it was just like, and what is it? The children of angels or whatever came down and mated with the children of men, or however it goes. And he just stops and goes, "Well, that's weird." And then just keeps going. Like,
just keep on going.
And I was like, in hindsight, I am proud of him for at least saying that.
I've actually heard people skip it.
Yeah, just totally not even read it.
They will skip that section. They will say, "Oh, we're in chapter 6. We're talking about the flood." They start talking about the flood, and they go back to verse 5 and kind of work their way down, and they skip that section.
Yeah.
Because it's too weird.
It's too much.
They don't know what to do with
it's
it.
too much. Can't handle it. Okay, we might be getting a little ahead of ourselves, but that was good.
Okay.
All right. So, yes, you're a pastor. Was that your game plan from the beginning? What was your how'd you come to know Jesus? What's your deal?
So I grew up in a Christian family. My mother was very, very strong believer, and my folks are still together. Both my parents, they love the Lord. They want to follow the Lord. So I grew up in a household where the Lord was talked about. We would have we in kind of that traditional, not traditional in the sort of, I don't know, in a Christian family. We went to church and we meant it.
Yeah.
So not like we would go to church sometimes and live however we wanted. Like we'd actually go. And what's funny is, growing up, my grandfather, my mother's father.
Oh.
I have a little bit of a cold, so
okay.
It just spares you from a
good job. I thought I just left you. Oh, and it just as another point here, you are on my favorite thing in the world, hotel internet.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely.
Which
I'm at the Marriott though, so it's like good hotel.
Yeah, it's coming across pretty good for you. I've had to
Excellent.
do so many episodes with poor hotel internet. Okay, continue.
Grew up in a Christian home. My mother's father, very, very dedicated believer. He's one of those believers that churches would ask to be a pastor. He would just visit someplace and he'd say, "Nope, Lord has me in a ministry." He was a cobbler for years and years, and then when people stopped cobbling, then he became
a real cobbler.
Oh yeah.
I didn't even know that was a thing. I thought those went the way of the bloodletters.
Well, they did, but he transitioned to just selling shoes. So
okay, the modern day cobbler.
Correct. Yeah, he still he still could though. He still had the bench, had the stuff.
Yeah, once you get to cobbling, you never lose that cobbleness.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. It's just in you. Yep. So he just faithful man, and wherever he went, Jesus went with him. At his funeral, there was hundreds of people there that my family had no idea who they were.
Right.
Just showing up from around the country.
Just very impactful.
Yeah, impactful, and he had no training. He was just a faithful man,
That's
and
awesome.
the Lord had a ministry for him. So definitely from that influence and those things, just from a young age, I came to know the Lord when I was 6. And actually, here's a funny story. I never told my mom. I was scared because I thought everybody must have understood this and I didn't know, and so I was embarrassed.
Wow.
So I was like, so I didn't tell anybody for a couple days.
That is hilarious.
It's like, I didn't want to say it because I didn't want them to know that I didn't know until then.
That you weren't the whole time.
Yeah, I must have just now understood, Jesus dying and coming back to life. I'm trying to put myself back to 6 years old. Everybody else must have known this, and I was embarrassed. So I didn't say.
Isn't that kind of how a lot of things are though? That's just one of the most wonderful times of life, one of the best things you could possibly do, and you're kind of embarrassed to tell people about it for whatever reason, but mostly because you thought you're a late bloomer, which I don't think you were a late bloomer at 6 years old.
No, my mom helped me understand that a little bit, so I was
good job, Mom.
Yeah. Great work. So and a lot of people have a testimony where it's like, I came to the Lord when I was like 5, and then I was super rebellious, and then came back to the Lord when I was like 20, and I just kind of didn't really have that. I'm definitely not bragging because I know it is because the godly influence of my family, and I had people praying for me, and it's the blessing of a good Christian family.
Just stuck with it.
Yeah, and I remember even age 7 and 8 thinking, I wonder what the Lord would want me to do in whatever situation. Like what would be pleasing to Jesus, and as simple as you can be at those.
Wow. Just
But
like WWJD as an operating system already.
yeah, I was just sort of like, well, that's just what we do, right? This is who we are now, right? This
Yeah.
is how we're supposed to be, and it kind of was odd. I thought it was odd that other people didn't really talk about, like other kids didn't really talk about that, and
Right.
that was not a big deal. And we'd be in Bible class, and then after that, whatever. I went to a Christian school K through 6, so um, I learned these different things, had a good upbringing, and when I got to 6th grade, that's where the Christian school ended, and my parents didn't want me to go to the local junior high.
Yeah,
Probably inspired a lot by fear, to be honest.
yeah, there's a lot of trouble. A lot of trouble happens at those
There
public
is.
junior highs. I'll tell
There
you
is.
what. I went to Christian school for 1 year, but it was the transition between elementary school and middle school.
Okay.
So I hit middle school in Christian school, and then the Christian school went out of business, and
Oh,
then
wow.
just got dropped into middle school. Like all of my friends or all the people I already knew had already been there for a year, and I just came out of Christian school and jumped in 7th grade, and it was like, whoa, this place is a den of sin.
What happened?
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so you can relate
I
in
get
certain
it.
sense.
I get it.
So I was actually homeschooled for 7th, 8th, ninth, which some people have, varying degrees of positive or negative experiences
Right, sure.
based on that. But I'd say I grew up with very protective parents, most of my mother. Hi, Mom. So I ended up not really, reaching out, branching out. I ended up just sort of doing my schoolwork, and then I liked to read, so I continued to read. I ended up reading a lot. I must have read through the Bible 2 or 3 times. I just we'd go to the library, and I would just grab, the library doesn't have a ton of Christian books, especially in Sonoma County. But
There's more books on crystals and
yes,
herbal remedies.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But ended up, reading whatever I could. I did cut my teeth on some prophecy with Hal Lindsey.
Classic.
Not great, late great planet Earth though. It was a different one. I can't remember the title of. I'll think of it later when it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's how it always works. But that was the time where God really got a hold of me. Side note, back up a little bit. We went to a church growing up where, I'll just be honest, it was a terrible church. It was not that Jesus wasn't preached, but Jesus wasn't lived out. And so it was incredibly legalistic. It was
which is way more common than we'd like to admit.
Absolutely. And the thing is it was just horrible example of church leadership. Elder board got dissolved, and there were other men in the church that just wouldn't stand up, and a lot of people left, and actually went from a healthy church, and then a new pastor was voted in. That's a huge story in and of itself, but all that to say, I had a horrible example of a church, and what that meant for me growing up, going there from age 4 or 5 up until junior high was I had no expectation of going to a church and being fed.
Wow.
Right. So in growing up, it was like, I just, this Jesus thing is just what we do, and really loving to read. I just ended up just feeding myself. And that's what I got used to doing.
You're like a little jungle boy.
Yeah. I was just out there, Mowgli running around. Where did he even get this loincloth?
I've been wondering the same thing. I'm so happy you brought it up so I didn't have to. It's
a huge continuity error, and understand that
he had to have stolen it.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, we're not even talking about that. Don't even bring that up. Probably learned it from monkeys. I hate monkeys.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about that. I'm writing that down.
Write that down.
Hates monkeys.
I absolutely hate monkeys. They are my nemesis. So, had this horrible example of church, which did lead me to research all this stuff myself. And being a kid, and I think this is true for all kids, if you don't tell them that what they're doing is outside of their age range, then they won't know.
Yeah.
Like if you let kids who like math just keep liking math, they're doing trigonometry in 5th grade and
Yeah,
have no
they'll
idea
just
that they
keep
shouldn't
going.
be doing. Yeah, I mean, what was it when Princeton first started? The average age was 13,
That's crazy.
and you had to come in knowing Greek and Latin, and I mean, it was insane.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Okay, so you hate monkeys, you know Greek
hate
and Latin,
monkeys.
and you can do trigonometry when you're 5.
No, not 5.
Spiritually speaking.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And doing that was the thing. If I was going to be fed, I had to feed myself.
Right.
And never had an expectation I would show up anywhere and not have to actually work for it.
Interesting.
So, I would listen to a sermon. I would follow along. I'd go home. I'd go back through the passage, look at the different points, and really think, how did we get there? Is this right? Should we get this out of this passage?
Wow.
Things like that, because I didn't know that's what you weren't. I didn't know people didn't do that.
Yeah.
Honestly, I was blessed with some really amazing mentors growing up as well. There was an 85-year-old pastor. He was a former pastor. And he's like, hey, this is when I was homeschooled. He'd say, hey, I'm just want to know if you wanted to do Bible studies sometime. It's like, sure. He's like, I'm gonna invite my friend. So the 3 of us. I was like, okay, great. So here I am. I'm 14. I'm doing a Bible study with an 85-year-old guy, and his friend shows up.
That's
who's
weird.
93.
Just gonna say it. That's weird.
It is weird, right? But I tell you what, listening to those guys talk about what they'd studied in the book of Galatians,
right,
like as a 13-year-old, was crazy.
Wow.
Just listening to how they handled more than half the time, but 80% of the time, I'm sitting there, I'm just listening to these guys go back and forth, just thinking, oh my, where is this? How are we, how did we get this here? And then walking through how they got that. And that was really where I started learning how those pieces started to fit together.
It's really interesting. We were joking around with the Mowgli thing, but if you take an outside view of the kid who's in Christian school and then homeschooled and then reads too much and then goes to a Bible study with 2 octogenarians and up, like that's a weird experience. Like looking back, do you appreciate like how like kind of strange? And again, I don't mean this in like I'm trying to make fun of you. I'm just saying like, wow, this is like
it's normal for me. I mean,
yeah.
That's how it happened every time I was 13. That's what happened. So
what was it like during that time? Because I've had friends who were formerly homeschooled and kind of had the same a similar vibe, and there's a lot of problems. Like, did you have friends? Were you a lonely kid? What was
that's actually it's like kind of the other part of the story. So I was doing these Bible studies and things. I didn't really have any friends.
Yeah,
I didn't. And for several years, that's what I really prayed for. Yeah. was that. And there's some pivotal points in my life where it was just very honest with the Lord and said, Lord, you are my best friend, right? You're with me all the time. I want to know you more. I know heaven is going to be great because you're there, but I just very honestly said, Lord, I would like to have just some friends.
Right.
And we started going to a new church. Great, really great church. Definitely not the same problems we had before. This is an excellent, healthy church.
On point.
On point is a great way to put it.
They got Jesus in the building.
Writing that down.
Yep. On Point Church. That's a great name for like a new hipster church.
Exactly.
On Point Church.
On Point Church. But it doesn't have walls. It's just kind of open.
Yeah, it's just literally a point.
Yeah. It's pointy on top.
Yeah.
And so I remember it was funny because I started going to the youth group and I would show up and I wouldn't really talk to anybody. I'm not like unfriendly. It was hard for me to be the initiator.
Yeah, and you're homeschooled and you're a weird church kid. Like, yeah, it's hard to work up the chops, those social chops.
It is, and it's always it's once you get the first one down, then it's okay. But I remember I always show up to youth group stuff like early. I was that weird kid.
Sure.
It's like, do you live here? It's like, it would be more convenient.
The youth pastor is like, why are you here?
had an amazing youth pastor. He was not the youth pastor who got the youth pastorate to move on to something.
Right.
He was a youth pastor because he was a youth pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew that he was surrogate dad to so many kids who needed a dad. I mean, he was youth pastor for, almost 2 decades.
Wow.
Kind of guy. And anyway, he was great. And he was super welcoming. I kept going because I loved listening to him and interacting with him. And then I remember going in one morning and there's 2 guys at the piano, which I thought was kind of funny. Not that guys can't play the piano, but walk in these guys and they're kind of arguing. They're like, no, it's like this. And I get closer and it's 2, they're twins. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's why they're fighting.
What? If I had to make a movie about a kid who was homeschooled and then needed to find friends in church, it would start with 2 twins arguing over how to play Come Thou Fount on the piano.
Yeah, they were arguing the key of some song they were trying to figure out. They both played music, and that was what they did. And so I remember I just went in, I saw them, and then I went and sat down, because that's what you do. You see people and you sit down by yourself.
Sit down and you watch them argue.
I was like, so I was just like reading.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny because it was almost the Lord, the still quiet voice that isn't audible just said, they look friendly. Like I remember, and I was like, oh, yeah, I guess so. And I walked over. I was like, all right, thanks, Lord. And I walked over and I just like started talking. I was like, what are you guys trying to play? I can't even remember what the conversation was.
Right.
But I just remember we talked for a while. Kids would come in. We were still talking, just hanging out. And then they went to go sit down. They was like, hey, come sit with us. And that was it. And started hanging out with them. And they were 2 years older than I was, but they were they're just really, really cool guys. And I remember they asked if I was coming to some youth group thing. I said, no, I don't have a ride. It's like, oh, we'll pick you up. And what was funny was I lived about 15 minutes in the opposite direction. They're like, oh, whatever, we'll pick you up. So they came out and picked me up and took me, and that's how it was. They just would come and do that. And I remember the second time they did, I had the super awkward DTR.
For those of you out there who don't know what DTR means, if you went to a Christian college or apparently were a young boy with twin friends, a DTR is a conversation that determines the relationship.
Oh, see, we said define the relationship.
Define. That actually is probably more accurate.
But colloquialisms they would change. Regional.
Yep.
And I remember it was super awkward because I was just super honest.
Mm-hmm.
I said, hey, when I saw you guys over there and I came and talked to you, it really was because I had prayed for friends and the Lord wanted me to talk to you.
Wow. Just
they're
straight up.
Yeah, because why not?
Yeah.
And they were just kind of like, whoa. And I said, I just really need friends. And it's funny, they looked at each other like, well, we'll be your friends. And that was it. They were just awkwardly honest back. And I was like, oh, okay, this actually might work out.
That's like the best possible DTR that could happen. Just right? Short, sweet, and mutual.
And done. And then it's like nothing changed. We just kept doing what we were doing.
Right.
But then it was almost like, they just were even more intentional. They're like, oh, you should just come over to our house. And honestly, they were just my best friends, all through college even.
Cool. And these were cool, godly dudes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right on.
Very, very godly. Love the Lord, want to follow the Lord. And so that was neat.
And then I'm curious. First of all, are you still friends with them?
I am, but sort of we're friends forever, so I don't talk to them for a long time, and then all of a sudden we'll chat again and be like, oh, it's like we never.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Are they kind of on the Genesis 6 fringy train there?
I haven't actually been able to bring it up with them. which sounds like a cop out, but
Hey,
you know,
I get it. You gotta. When I was in college, there was something called the DTR bench, which was a bench
ooh,
outside of the male dorm,
okay.
where you could just look out your window on any night of the week and just see a guy and a dude, or, not a guy and a dude, a guy and a girl. Okay, well, who knows? But yeah, a guy and a girl just working it out, just defining that
Ah,
relationship, just having
where
super intentional conversations.
where I went to school, it was a gazebo.
Oh, that's fancy.
What was funny was it was sort of like in the middle of this like park almost area, and it was lit. So if that was at night, it was almost like you were on
That's
display
really
on
awkward.
a stage.
That
Yeah,
is so awkward.
it was super awkward. People are sitting there like, "Oh shoot, man, it's going down."
So you so you made some friends, you prayed for friends and got them.
I got him.
That's always an awesome way to do it.
Look at that.
You know, and it's amazing. I've actually heard quite a few like pray for friends prayer being answered. I think God's good at if you need a friend, just pray for it. People out
And
there.
isn't it funny how the good friends are? I'm doing the best I can to not quote Michael W. Smith. I'm just trying not to,
Don't try
and
too hard.
it's almost happened a couple times, so I'm trying to pull back. But friends that are, if you're, as believers, we need friends. There's a reason why Jesus sent out his disciples in twos, and it wasn't just so that they didn't get lost. It was intentionally relational. And you had to know that Peter and John had to enjoy hanging out with each other.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just wonder what happened with the two, like whoever ended up with Judas. They're going around and like, dude, I know
Maybe.
we all went out and they're doing awesome stuff, but man, I don't know. There's something up with Judas.
I don't know about this guy, man. Can I hang with you guys for a while? Oh, that's
He's nice
funny.
and all, but it's just, I don't know.
So, when did you start getting into, when did the fringe Genesis 6 and Bible prophecy stuff start creeping its way in?
So, growing up, my dad traveled quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
My dad's from Denmark, and my dad and his brother, they had a business over there, and so he would travel quite a bit over there, and they were working on patent stuff, and so once it starts, you have to stay for a while,
Right.
and so he would be there for literally like 8 weeks. And there was one time where it was particularly long. He was gone for almost 3 months. And so my mom said, "Oh, we're just gonna go." And I was homeschooled. It was right when I had finished 6th grade. So I said, "Oh, we're just gonna move out to and stay with my grandma and with my mom's mom." My grandfather had died, and so he was with the Lord. She had remarried. That's a cool story in and of itself. Two widowers, a widower and a widow,
Mm-hmm.
got married. So anyway, he was amazing. He was great because he never pretended that he was my grandfather, but he was a grandfather to me. He
Wow.
didn't. He was just really neat. He was a really amazing Christian man. And while my mom's family grew up really poor, obviously because he was a cobbler, and that's just what you think. There's no rich cobblers except for the one that had the elves or whatever.
Yeah, I was gonna
But
say you got to get some corporate structure to that profession to
that's
make any
right.
money,
That's right. And he was a horrible businessman anyway.
as most cobblers are. I'm just gonna say it. Somebody
He
needs to
would
say
just
it.
thank you for putting it on the record. But he would just give stuff away.
Yeah.
Like someone needed who just give it away. So and he was so my granddad. That's what we called him, whom my grandmother remarried.
Yeah.
So granddad, he was the opposite. He actually was very well off. He had a very successful, believe it or not, tire business in Fallon, Nevada, of all
Wow.
places, which is the weirdest place to say someone's in the Navy, in Fallon.
That is, yeah. For those who don't know, I mean, pretty much all of Nevada is just a wasteland, but Fallon, I think, is I would say a notch closer to wasteland than
Yeah.
Maybe Vegas or something.
Yeah. It's pretty desolate, but he had a pretty successful business. Anyway, he was the kind of guy who, if there was an offer on TV from a Christian speaker or author or at church or something, he would just buy everything. They have the deluxe package that nobody buys.
Sure, yeah.
He's like, oh no, I'm gonna buy it.
He would love Skywatch TV then.
Absolutely, he would have every single thing that they ever. Except he'd always, he'd overpay. He's just like donating,
Yeah.
So, but he never
very
read
generous. He's a generous
Absolutely.
guy.
But he wouldn't really read all of it. He'd watch the videos. But so we went and stayed with him, and in his basement, he's like, hey, you can go down and you can, check any of that stuff out. I went down there, and it was this massive basement full of amazing old school Christian resources and just crazy books. Just the whole thing was full of stuff. So I was down there. I'm geeking out, pulling stuff out and looking around. And I come across a book that's called, what was it called? Crash Go the Chariots.
Whoa, that is the coolest book name I've ever heard.
It's pretty awesome. And you can buy it. I looked it up real quick, and it's like $50 on Amazon.
Whoa.
So it's out of print,
Yeah.
And so this Crash Go the Chariots was actually a response to Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods.
Huh.
Have you ever read that one?
No, I have not.
So this was Ancient Aliens before Ancient Aliens.
Oh, man.
So this is like 70s sort of resources. And so I found this thing. It was a response to it. And I was reading through it. And so his argument is...
It was like the first Ancient Aliens debunked?
There it was. It was the first Ancient Aliens debunked. So he was very specifically hitting all the points in the book, And so he would do a real quick synopsis and then rebut it.
Yeah.
And I was absolutely fascinated by that. And I was reading through it, not the whole rebuttal part, that was interesting, but just I was reading the initial statements from Chariots of the Gods and thinking, what? And I've won the world. What are Anunnaki? What is
right?
What is this stuff? Incidentally, my granddad also had the best cable package available, which included at that time the Sci-Fi Network.
His generosity was not just to televangelists; it was also to the cable company.
Absolutely.
Nice.
So we had that, and I remember, during the day, if you're homeschooled, any of you who are homeschooled out there, you remember this. You can finish your work in like 90 minutes. Everything. You're done.
That sounds awesome.
It's just like, you just had your work, and there's no distraction. If you understand it, you would just do it. So
right.
I was done with all my schoolwork in an hour and a half. I had the whole rest of the day. So what do? I watched the Sci-Fi Channel. For part of the day. And on there, of course, they had some of the old school sci-fi stuff, including Battlestar Galactica, the original one.
Oh boy. Which
all of a sudden, spoiler alert, is connected with that whole ancient alien thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they also had on old school Sci-Fi Channel, Leonard Nimoy's, what is the name of it? It's not it's Ancient Mysteries. That's what it is, I think.
Okay, I never saw it. I feel left out now.
But it was this like look into a particular thing, but it was narrated by Leonard Nimoy.
That's awesome.
How cool can that be?
Really cool.
Pretty cool. Yeah, exactly. And so watching that, and of course half the time it's Easter Island statues. Where did these come from? And so all of these things are all lining up, and some of these sources are from that other side, and I've got some of these sources down in this basement that are the rebuttal, and I was thinking, oh my goodness, what if, and then I was putting together Battlestar Galactica thinking, what if that's all mythology? Right? What if it's, Zeus actually was alive and these things? And so then when I was reading back through the Bible, I was like, oh, there it is. So I remember reading Genesis 6 and just reading it and saying, oh, this is probably where they're getting the alien stuff.
Dude, this is like I can't think of a better way for somebody to start learning or to have this revealed to them. Like, I mean, nowadays, and especially like my children or whoever, any children who come from now until later, they're just going to get it from the internet. And there's a bunch of weird stuff on the internet. I remember when I started first looking into it, most of it was just like blogs, weird blogs with like black backgrounds and green lettering. And you had like official published like rebuttal research books mixed with some of the best science programming available on your cable box.
Yeah, exactly. Battlestar Galactica. Which I don't think fit into any of the categories that you put in there.
No, but you did start making the connections.
Yeah, it was crazy because I would read, and obviously it's the Holy Spirit, right?
Yeah.
And I remember reading that and thinking that this makes so much sense. Mm-hmm. If this is, it's the giants, and it says, and I remember thinking, men of old, men of renown. It's like that's how I would describe the gods.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
It's like, sure. So I was 13 years old and I had that, and I never heard anyone talk about that.
Wow.
After I was just like, this just makes sense. And I was looking, and I connected it with some of the stuff with Joshua, but I didn't really, and honestly, I didn't even make the connection with 1st and 2nd Peter and Jude. Like, I didn't make all of those connections. That was, a much more recent thing.
Yeah.
When I was in my 20s, finally, okay, all the pieces.
So how old were you at this time? You were like 12, 13?
I was 13.
That might be the youngest that I've talked to somebody about learning about this stuff. I mean, even some of the old school folks, they learned maybe in their 20s or 30s, but 12 or 13, that's like real OG. And and you learned it from a real thing. It wasn't like your crazy uncle who lives in the garage.
Oh, I gotta tell you about my crazy uncle, but that's more the 9/11 stuff. But anyway.
Oh, of course.
Everybody's got the crazy uncle 9/11 story.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's where it kind of started. And honestly, I didn't really talk to a lot of people about it. I would ask some questions.
Yeah.
But I didn't really talk about it. It was just something I was like, oh, it's there. And until I see something that refutes it, I'm going to hold on to that.
Yeah.
And obviously didn't understand how pivotal a lot of those things really were.
Was that exciting? I feel like connected to that would be like the excitement of discovery. Like learning something without having somebody teach you it and making the connections yourself and stuff like that. Like there's been a few moments in my life where I get to experience that, but I could see how that could be a huge, just like almost beacon of ecstasy as a child, as a young, precocious young child.
It was pretty cool, but I don't think I ever put it together like that. I was reading a ton of other things.
Right.
I was reading a ton of other books by other dead guys, and I was just thinking I was learning from these other dead guys.
Yeah.
And it was almost like I'm in school with these dead guy teachers.
Yeah. What a great argument for homeschool. I mean, I can't say that I would have ever made the argument for homeschool, but just the fact that it taught you to teach yourself.
Honestly, that's probably the best thing that could have come out.
Yeah.
For myself. That's really what it was. But yeah, I did. So for that time, I did that, and it was sad because my granddad, he died a few years after that. He actually he left me his whole library, but it was one of those things, we didn't live near there, and the other family cleaned out the house, and so I lost that whole library.
Oh, that's a bummer.
It was, because there's a ton of amazing stuff and amazing things in there.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So that was kind of your first opening up to at least kind of the Bible prophecy / fringe Christian stuff that nobody wanted to talk about. And now you're a pastor and you get to bring it up in Bible study.
Now I get to bring it up in Bible study.
Now you get to see. Now here's something that I think is fascinating, and I've had my own experiences with this, but I want to I want to see how deep we can get with you, and because there's a lot of people listening, obviously, who aren't pastors or aren't part of top tier church leadership, and there's as someone who's been in church leadership, I've I've noticed more than anything that there's a lot of like mystery about what actually happens in the pastor's office or about how decisions get made. Maybe that's just been the churches that I've been in, but if I were somebody who can't find a church that talks about this kind of stuff, I mean, I might even start obsessing a little bit about conspiracies, about how the devil has infiltrated my church and trying to keep the truth from me. Have you had any experiences with the church leadership where you work of like, I'm not trying to blow up your spot here, but about talking about it or making available different, I mean, I guess obviously you did a little Q&A session, but what's that like within the leadership of the church you work at?
Honestly, the church structure that we have, we're a smaller church. There's only three of us pastors.
Right.
And we're the only elders as well. We've asked some other men to join, but it's not the time for some of them. So,
you've got a pretty agile group there. You're not trying to fight the bureaucracy.
No, not at all. And honestly, the three of us are very open about a lot of these things. We have these kind of discussions. It's like, oh, I just learned this really weird thing.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's pretty cool. And even some things where at the end we're like, oh, I kind of disagree about that. We make sure that we leave it on, are any of the views we talked about actually heretical?
Right.
And biblical basis. And we've actually come to a place where we'd said, okay, so how are we going to teach this since we have a slightly different view on this? And we have enough respect for what the Lord is teaching each other to be able to. So for instance, I'm not pre-trib. But one of the pastors church was, and I don't know if he still is now, actually, I haven't talked about it in a while, but he said that's where I'm at. And so what it meant was when he would teach and we would get to eschatology, there is not the heavy-handed pre-trib doctrinal slant that there could be, because not everybody holds this view.
Sounds like you guys kind of got everything together over there. That sounds really pleasant and like a respectable arrangement. If I were a parishioner,
we've been blessed, honestly.
Yeah, because
all it is.
I'll tell you what, that doesn't happen all the time. I mean, people lose their jobs, people, leave churches, people do all sorts of stuff when stuff comes up and they can't agree on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So good on you.
Yeah. Honestly, it's the Lord. It's not us. It's just us being willing to just let the Lord be the Lord, and we're his under shepherds. We aren't the shepherds. So we try to hold that. And I think we all recognize that our views are all changing. Like my views have changed over the past few years and on certain topics of theology, and so have theirs, but it's all within the bounds of orthodoxy, and we have very good discussions and we sharpen each other, and there we go.
That's great, man. Now, what about things getting a little crazier? Things like conspiracy theories, Illuminati, whatever that may be. What is that something that you're at least intellectually engaged in? Is that something? I mean, you listen to Canary Cry Radio, so I'm assuming that you've at least got a little bit of knowledge about that stuff.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Oh no, continue. I was just going to ask how that happened and what that was like.
You can actually blame my dad for that.
Oh, Daddy.
Oh, Dad. He. What was funny was. It was so funny because I don't think it had anything to do with something I'd actually brought up. I think at the time I was watching some sci-fi show, and when he would be working in his office, he would just have the radio on, and it went over to coast to coast. And so I was 15, I think, and he was like, "Oh, you like that sci-fi stuff? Like, you should listen to this."
Classic.
Like, okay.
Dude, and coast to coast.
Yeah.
Doing the Lord's work all over the place.
I was like, oh my gosh, that was crazy.
Yeah.
To then go from what I had to then go there, it was nuts. Talking about shadow people and
Oh yeah.
aliens and yeah, so that was nuts.
So
but that was my introduction, all that.
Yeah, so it was coast to coast, kind of gave you the intro and started waking you up to a lot of. I mean, I don't know. I almost feel like, was that even like a big mind blowing moment? I feel like you were the type of kid who just, if the evidence is there, then it's just true, and that's the way the world is.
And that was listening to guests and a host that entertain a lot of those things, but very clearly are lost.
Yeah.
And so it was a window into this. There's a ton of people listening to this, and they're building their worldview out of something like this.
Right.
They're doing it without Jesus, and so that bridge is not going to handle the pressures of life. It's going to crumble.
That's interesting.
So just think about that. It's like, wow, these are, and okay, for people who don't know about Sonoma County, we not, and I'm not bragging about this, but Sonoma County is at least responsible for 2 cults, I think, two New Agey cults.
That's more than most.
The Center for Noetic Sciences is in the city. Yeah, that's weird.
That's a weird one.
There's lots of things happening, and of course you got Bohemian Grove and a whole bunch of crazy stuff going on.
Yeah, I talked to Kelsey a little bit about this. Have you come in contact, not just with Bohemian Grove, obviously her and I talked about that a little bit, but with any of that sort of stuff? What's been your experience coming in contact with, I guess, straight up legit cults, or just, the kind of Bay Area wacky folk?
So it's in the Old Testament when it talks about them worshiping the Asherah, and they have the groves.
Yeah.
And then it would talk about something like, one of the kings goes and cuts down the groves.
Uh-huh.
I mean, this is a grove. This is what it is. People go out there to engage in some sort of worship, and understand that, and you understand this obviously, but people who are totally lost and hedonistic and following after any passion that they have, that is just as satanic as if they, raised an Asherah pole.
Yeah.
That's what it is, even if it's not called that.
Yeah. That's why you got to be careful throwing around the terms satanic or Satanism, because as far as, the official, Church of Satan definition, it's basically just serving yourself, doing your own stuff, cruising around, following the whims of your fancy. Yeah. So that's interesting. So it's pretty much that's the at least a major culture in that area.
It's very very open. So everything is very open except for biblical Christianity.
Really?
That's the one that's people tolerate it to a point.
Yeah.
But that's what gets shouted down.
Really? So it could just be pretty much any. Well, I mean, we've kind of been experiencing this a little bit in America, and this conversation, in a broad term, doesn't necessarily require my voice to shed any light on it. But there's a lot of tolerance for a lot of people, and Christians seem to be the last, either to just be given it, or sadly, in some terms, they don't necessarily earn it, But so that's exactly how it was over there, or is over there. Yeah,
and there's even, there have been times going into either a shop or go to an area where, the Holy Spirit lets you know that there is something wrong here, and that you should probably leave.
Yeah.
I remember I was trying to walk into a store, and I felt like I couldn't actually do it. Like I had to leave.
Yeah, I know. I totally get that.
Get some of those things. And I used to work for a very major retailer. I don't know if we're into dropping those sort of things.
No buzz marketing.
It was Forrest Gump's Fruit Company, but I I would be in the store and I would see guys come in with their little polos, and it's got the little owl there on
Wow.
there, and just there with their families and stuff. And I look at them, and I just like I had a really hard time
Yeah.
not treating them any differently because
Yeah.
it's just like, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? And I almost wanted to warn them, like, get out quick,
Run.
burn the shirt.
Yeah.
But so you got that whole thing going on at the same time, though. One of the blessings is you can't find a place where people are more willing to talk about spiritual things. So if you pull an L.A. Marzulli and just use different terms, you end up agreeing on a whole lot of things. And then when they find out you're a Jesus person, then they're like, don't quite understand what happened.
Wow.
But
yeah, hey, I get you. I mean, I've been able to connect with, certainly people that I would never be able to connect with just talking about Jesus, just talking about, the Illuminati or aliens or anything like that.
I think I may have sent this message to you. I may have sent it to Gons, but I had the most bizarre experience. Not to derail this, very well scripted conversation, but we were. I was eating lunch. I was at work, and I had time for lunch, and so I went out and I got a sandwich.
Yeah.
And I was eating, and this guy comes up to me, and it was super weird. You know when you're walking around, and the person comes up to you, and you kind of see they have a tract in their hand, and you're like, okay, I know what you're gonna ask me.
Here we go.
I'm gonna let you do your thing, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna let you know afterward that I am a Christian. It almost felt like that, like he was walking up, and you knew he was gonna say something,
right?
So he walks up and he starts talking. He's like, hey, I just had a question for you. And I thought that for a second. It was like, oh, maybe he's going to evangelize to me, but his clothes are way too dirty. He just did not. That was not his intention. He was just happening to see me and came over.
Yeah.
Let me explain. He was like working or something. He was like, he had paint and stuff. So he was clearly like there from work or something.
Sure.
And he walks over and he just says, hey, I just have a question. It's like, how do you spell Bernstein Bears?
Oh, no.
And I looked at him and I almost started laughing in his face.
Oh, that's great. He's gonna evangelize you to the Mandela effect.
No, hold on. I messed it up. I messed up my own thing.
Okay.
I was wearing a Star Wars hat.
Uh-huh.
He comes over and he says, hey, what's the line? Is it Luke, I am your father? Or is it I am your father? And then I said back to him, that was my answer, was I don't know, how do you spell Bernstein Bears?
Oh, that's even better.
He's like, no. It's like, That's like, yeah, Mandela effect, man. He's like, oh my gosh,
That's so funny.
Like,
just an instant connection. What a great little secret handshake you had with him too.
It was so funny. And then he starts going off on something else, and I gotta leave. I gotta go back to work.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, buddy, I'd like to have a longer conversation, but I just want to let you know, or ask you the question: if they're going back in time, why are they changing that?
Right.
It's like, and there are much bigger things we should be paying attention to.
Yeah.
Right. There are a lot scary things we should be looking at. And Jesus is actually the answer for that.
Whoa,
and I just
boom, dropping it.
And I was like, that's the worst evangelism ever. Like, Jesus, gotta run.
Mandela effect evangelism.
I felt like I have to at least bring Jesus up.
Yeah.
And so then I was like, sorry, Lord, that was it.
Hey, that's all I had. Maybe that's all he needed. He just needed that little seed just to put him on the right track. And then you hand him a USB drive with 100 episodes of Canary Cry Radio on it.
You go.
And then it blows his mind. All right. So now a big part of this podcast, obviously, is talking about kind of not just how and what happens when we learn about, all these sorts of things, but also kind of where it leads our life kind of emotionally. Now, I have ceased expecting everybody having a similar experience, but I am curious. I mean, not even at the beginning, but throughout this exploration and journey about learning about biblical prophecy, fringe Christian stuff, and then the more classic conspiracy theory type things. A lot of people, even ones who are as quote Christian as they come or love Jesus, will experience different emotions or at least mental states at times. Have you ever experienced anything like that? That is just sort of gets overwhelming once you start stacking up all of these things together.
Yeah, I think that I think Chris White talked about that too. There's this almost I can't remember what he called it.
He calls it
was profound.
Yeah,
whatever it was,
syndrome or whatever.
But it's almost like, for me at least, it was almost like a period of mourning. And part of it was more. It's almost like, okay, have you seen Braveheart?
Heck yeah, I've seen Braveheart.
I don't know why I asked, but I felt like I needed to, just in case, because then the reference doesn't make sense. But
yeah, that's true.
So in Braveheart, when do we need to do a spoiler alert? What's the statute of limitation on a spoiler alert?
I think I'll put a warning at the beginning.
Okay,
disclaimer.
Please do. Just because it's terrible if you haven't seen it. But when he realizes that guy he's jousting with is Robert the Bruce.
Yeah.
Takes the helmet off. He's just like, and he just gives up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what? And that's what it feels like. It feels like you had a friend and you found out he's the biggest traitor ever. And cares nothing for you, hates you, and is trying to kill you.
Yeah.
And that's almost what it feels like.
Wow.
And I didn't have any connections to a lot of that stuff. Everything that I was researching looking into was aliens and Nephilim and UFOs. And depending on what you do with UFOs, as far as where you look, it starts to get political.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did listen to that Bill Cooper thing, and I was like, okay, I don't know, Bill.
What's the Bill Cooper thing?
Have you not heard this? It isn't like something about horses. It was like a horse. It's late. I just flew in.
That's okay. We'll move on.
I can't remember. But it's this. It ties UFOs with the government and Eisenhower and all. So you could go that route. But up until then, I had never really done that.
Mm-hmm.
I was still Republican Christian guy.
Yeah.
And for anybody listening who is a Republican, I'm not saying anything, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I didn't question any of those things, and I was like, yeah, of course we're gonna vote for Bush, and
right.
All that sort of stuff. And I never clicked into that until I started looking into 9/11, and it was Building 7.
Yeah.
It's just that makes no sense, and I have to get to the bottom of something if I start. So of course there's internet black hole for you if there ever was.
Oh yeah.
Watch Loose Change, and you'd have to start watching videos and then almost cross-referencing and saying, okay, well that's not right, and then this other one had this thing, so that's not right. There's no planes, there are planes, there are missiles. There were mini nukes, there's no nukes.
Yeah.
Well, whatever. But it got to the point where I finally was satisfied with at least enough of the story to be like, whoa, I've been completely betrayed by some of these things, some of these elements. And there was that several months of just like mourning, almost like the world that as you knew it is totally different.
Yeah. I find it so interesting that, and it being a mourning, and I think everybody who does start to wake up to this stuff needs to be kind of intentional about it, because there's good ways to mourn and there's bad ways to mourn. And I feel like a lot of the anger and even kind of, its own sort of fanaticism or something comes from like a mourning done improperly.
Yeah.
So what was that process for you? For me, it was more like trying to fit the pieces in a puzzle. Right.
Because then, 9/11 goes back to the Clinton era. And then I started looking at Oklahoma City, stuff around there. So it basically just, okay, I need to think about this thing. Then, I had to look into this thing.
Yeah.
And going all the way back to, go through all the different wars and then I remember like all of a sudden, like almost throwing not throwing, but like dropping a book.
Yeah.
When I had the realizations, like no one in the world knows why we even had World War One.
Yeah.
Why did we do that?
Yeah.
No one can give me a good answer. Yeah, an archduke someplace got shot. Lots of people get shot. We
Yeah.
don't start blowing up the world over it.
Yeah.
Just things like that. All of a sudden, I have to rethink. And then, Bay of Pigs, and oh my gosh, what is happening?
So it really was kind of, at least from what I've heard so far, very much a like government sort of centered, or powers of the world centered. Like they're not out for my well-being.
Yeah, and you hope that there's at least a general consensus of wanting to do good things.
Right. It's the assumption everybody makes. I mean, when you're talking to somebody about conspiracy stuff, I mean, at least in my experience, it more often than not goes to, well, why would they do that? Like, well, because, they want to rule the world. They want to be rich. They want to live forever, whatever it may be in its certain, case.
Right.
But it's just like, it's so hard to break and detach yourself from the assumption that the leaders, the people who we call our leaders, don't always have our best interests in mind.
Right. And they're reptilian.
And they're reptilians who eat babies. Sorry, babies.
I don't believe that, by the way.
Well,
I have to clarify almost.
I don't know. It's on the record now.
If it happened to be true, it wouldn't shock me.
The lizard people is one of those ones that's making it oddly mainstream.
Isn't it funny?
It's hilarious.
I saw several articles on it.
Yeah, it's everywhere now.
There's someone who's defending it and is like, not just because they're reptilian does not mean they're extraterrestrials, okay?
I'm not one of those crazy people who thinks the lizard men are aliens.
No, they're local. I mean, they're from here. So, it's not like get off our planet. Time. Yeah.
The whole Ted Cruz is a lizard person thing. That was hilarious. I almost believe it because of Ted Cruz.
There's just so many. I mean, if you're really looking for conspiracy theories, there's too many.
No.
There's way too many. I mean, then you got the granddaddy of them all, which was, JFK.
Right.
Which, I mean, a lot of people are like, I don't know, that JFK thing.
You mean not him being a lizard person, but the classic JFK.
The classic JFK is a Bruder film, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
There's a lot of people who have looked into, we've looked into that. And even the movie JFK.
Yeah.
People were bringing it up, talking about it. I mean, I feel like there's enough in popular culture to where when it actually happens, I think that people have the snap judgment, and it's almost like when people get really horribly tragic news, there's that snap of shock, like no way that's true.
Right.
And I feel like they snap themselves out of that.
Yeah.
And then there's enough people encouraging them, no, it's not true, that then they just never think about it again.
Yeah, of course. So this morning, the morning, your morning,
mine
morning, I mean, have you recovered? Are you okay? What was that like? Right. Is that still, I mean, I believe that that's kind of a constant part of the fringe Christian conspiracy, blah, blah, blah journey, is you are kind of constantly having to mourn the loss of the way that you thought the world was. And especially even inside the culture, there's so many things that change around and switch around. And then you start mourning the fact that your favorite author isn't pre-trib or something like that. You just start to nitpick little things to be upset about. But that's a whole nother story.
It is a whole other story. Yeah. I'll be honest, when you first said, so how was your morning? I was thinking, are we changing to I did today?
We're just going back to a lighter conversation.
I was like, wow, okay.
I know, that's why I was trying to phrase it different ways, but it wasn't helping.
No, I got it. I got it by the context.
Okay, good.
It honestly, for me, it just got to a point where once it became true, to where I'd seen enough evidence to put the pieces together,
right? Then
it was okay. And the thing was, I think that I had a ever so slightly different experience with the 9/11 thing, because here comes my crazy uncle story.
Nice.
And I say crazy lovingly, right?
Yeah, of course.
He was not actually crazy.
No, if it's not loving, you don't say crazy.
It's true.
You say
it's true.
Else. Yeah.
I loved him. He was one of those legitimately sort of like a garage mad scientist.
That's awesome.
He developed some stuff. It's being used by the military. I know as soon as if I say his name, we'll start getting monitored.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. But he had developed some stuff. It's used by the military now and stuff. But working with different types of not explosives, but something in incendiaries and some of the stuff he had talked about and discussed. I remember hearing some of the rhetoric around 9/11 and people saying, well, that's impossible. And I was like, no, it's not. My uncle did this experiment and showed that it was.
Interesting.
Right. So there were pieces that made sense from that. And so for me, it was a little bit easier to jump back into they're lying.
Interesting.
Like as soon as they say, oh, well, jet fuel can melt steel. It's like, jet fuel can't melt steel. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Right.
Like that's not even a thing. I don't care what you believe. That's just not a thing. Like anybody can go. Well, not anybody, I guess, but you can go and test that. Don't test it. Don't really do it, but you could. That's part of the crazy part of the uncle part.
Right. Right.
That he did.
He was able to test jet fuel.
He was able to test it. Stuff, but he and I never talked about that stuff at all.
Right.
But just from that experience, I think I had a little bit more like, no, there are things that are happening that they would just lie to us about.
Yeah.
Because they did it all day long. So I think I snapped out of it a little sooner just from being like, no, this is just true. Like you just have to.
It seems like you were perfectly set up. I mean, even the story about crazy uncle, like nobody has that. Nobody, not very many people have crazy uncle who can actually literally empirically test if jet fuel can melt steel beams. And it feels like more than anything, you were almost given permission to question things from a very young age.
Yeah, I was. I was always encouraged to learn. I was that kid who got the National Geographic as a gift.
Yeah.
The subscription.
Yeah.
As a kid.
I had that for years.
I love that, man.
I'm still trying to figure out where to put these things.
You've got stacks and stacks. I don't know what to do. You can't throw them out.
No.
They're valuable. But I loved learning anything.
Yeah.
I loved any kind of information, anything. The most off the wall fact. Just in elementary school, I remember finding in an encyclopedia all the flags of the world.
Yeah.
So I would test myself just because I thought it was fun. Like, oh, can I figure out all the flags for all the different countries?
That's so funny.
I had
a set of encyclopedias as well, and there was definitely a period of time where I was an only child. I don't think that's any news to anybody. And so, yeah, just a lot of time looking through the encyclopedia, just checking it out. I wasn't as good of a self-student as you, but just the fact of having them there was a fun thing. Now kids have the internet.
I know our kids are never going to
know what it's like to have
what encyclopedia
an
is.
entire closet filled with 36 volumes potentially containing all the knowledge of the world.
It's insane.
Yep.
It's insane. And you know what I think? If you look at the world now, there's always a thought that more information is always you're going to get better things.
Right.
But I think the one thing we've lost, we have a ton of information in zero context.
Yeah.
No one knows what to do with any of this stuff.
Yeah.
And so they just have knowledge. Like if you have conversations with people, like you can listen to them just spout off lists of things.
Yeah.
And have no place to put any of this stuff. Conversations become, especially if you're talking about something that is maybe slightly controversial.
Yeah.
They click into I'm going to list off the points. And if anybody's done evangelism, apologetics kind of stuff, that's what people do.
Yeah.
Just go back to lists of things.
That's exactly right. That actually kind of brings up something I'm was wanting to ask you, which was, as a church leader and as somebody who's awake to this sort of thing, I'm assuming at least on occasion you've had the chance to talk to people about things like this. I don't know, maybe it's church policy not to talk about Bush did 9/11 or anything on the pulpit, but have you had any experience with that? And I'm thinking more like with church members, because like I said, we get so many people hitting us up for like, and a large criticism in this community is like, why aren't they talking about this stuff in church? Why aren't they talking about this stuff in church? And I'm curious to see what you have to say, but I have some of my own ideas. But I want to hear your experience first.
Well, having those kind of conversations, honestly, they just don't come up all that often.
Right.
You don't just ambush people like that.
Yeah.
Which I've done before, and it doesn't turn out well.
Have people actually come to you and asked about these things?
I've had people come and ask me about 9/11. And it's funny because I haven't talked about it. They said, hey, I have some questions. Have you ever looked into 9/11 stuff? I was like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, we need to talk about that. I was like, sure. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And, any kind of conversation where it's conspiracy oriented,
mm-hmm.
We talk about it, and you can tell the places where they're starting to skid around and they're hitting the freak out point.
Yeah.
You bring it back to Psalm 2. It's like, this isn't a surprise. The kings of the earth are conspiring against the Lord. That's how it's always been. It's always been a conspiracy. It's just changed how it is, right? It's just, or the context has changed.
That's good.
It's always been that way. It's been the conspiracy since Satan in the garden. That was a conspiracy.
Yeah.
And so, yes, that's the conspiratorial view of history and current events, I think, is the correct one.
Yeah.
Because it's biblical. There was a grand conspiracy to kill the baby Jesus.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And that's what it was it not? There was a grand conspiracy to kill Jesus and then to cover it up when he was resurrected.
There you go. Boom. That's boom goes the dynamite right there.
It is a biblical stance to start with that viewpoint.
Do you think that somebody trying to criticize if somebody was trying to criticize the Christian truther fringe community, they could say like, oh yeah, you just are so easy to believe conspiracies because you've been trained since the birth of Jesus that there's conspiracies.
I don't think people put in that context though.
Right.
They just say like, well, the Jesus thing's normal because that's what we believe.
Yeah.
And so I don't think they necessarily put it in that type of perspective.
Yeah.
They just, now in this camp and we talk about these things.
Yeah. Even Judas Iscariot, that's the turning over of Jesus.
There you go.
Yeah. That was a conspiracy. He got paid that shiny silver coins. I don't know why I put it that way, but
shiny,
it's true.
Shiny coins.
Shiny coins.
That's what it's about.
Judas loves shiny.
That's some sort of band name. Either shiny coins or Judas loves shiny.
Judas loves shiny. It's a side project from Judas Priest.
There you go.
All right, so I guess you as far as the sharing of this information, it isn't much of like a church-based thing. I mean, when people come to you with that kind of stuff, it's more of on a personal basis, because that's kind of what I'm curious about when people ask for churches, and God bless them. I'm not saying don't look for this type of church. I'm just wondering what church would possibly start teaching, full-length sermon series on the Nephilim. Maybe the Nephilim, because it's like a nice little starting point. And I know a lot of churches do Revelation sermon series or Bible prophecy meetings or something. But I just can't imagine it to what level it would make it in.
It's so difficult to, it's like smacking someone upside the head with a 2x4.
Yeah.
It's like, and here you go.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, that was out of nowhere. Why are we even? What's happening?
And especially when it's out of the context of conversation. You know, I feel like this sort of these sort of bombshells, they have to be done in conversation, and even better, inside of relationship.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, how many people do you know who? I'm not saying it can't happen, right?
Yeah.
But how many people do you know who got saved listening to a street preacher?
Yeah, not many.
That may have been one chain or one link in the chain, like
Right.
leading to salvation. But very, very few people have been saved either at a street or even a church service,
Yeah.
like at a sermon. Most people, I'm going to make up a statistic, more than 90% made it up. They were saved through a relationship that they had with someone.
Yeah.
And so to expect to all of a sudden start talking about these things like that, like we're just going to stand up, we're just going to start shouting at people.
Yeah.
We're just going to flash up there on the slide, 9/11 was an inside job, like in the middle of the sermon. Stir things up a bit.
Oops, how'd that get in there? I don't know. Oops, my button isn't moving the slide. Soak it in.
I don't know. I can't. Subliminal.
Well, while we're on the subject, no, okay. So yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I feel like a lot of times, I mean, I don't know. So somehow Alex Jones has made a career out of it, literally shouting conspiracies at you.
Yeah, but he's not doing it from the pulpit.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference is when people come to Sunday morning, because you know what, people say they want to hear this stuff, but if that's all you hear every Sunday,
yeah,
it's not healthy.
You can't get
that's
it
not
all
a well-balanced
day.
meal.
You can't get it all day on Facebook, all day listening to podcasts, and go to church and get it too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because we lose focus of what the real objective is. And the objective is Jesus. The objective is him and him crucified, and the coming kingdom and the promise of resurrection. And these other things are things that happen, but it's not the massive focal point that we make it. And I think we make it much bigger than it is because it's something that has a lot of weight in our own lives.
Yeah.
And like, this is a major pivotal point. And so I need to share that with everybody, but not everybody's ready for that. Actually, funny story. I did that to my brother. Like he's younger than me. It's funny. He's almost 9 years younger than me, but he's pretty much my best friend. He was in high school at the time. He must have been 15 or 16 when I was going back through a lot of the 9/11 government, all that kind of stuff. And I remember one time I just dropped it on him. I was just like, "Hey, 9/11 was an inside job." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" And I just backed up the dump truck and I just buried him in peat moss.
Yeah.
It was crazy. And he was like, his head was spinning. He didn't know what was going on. And I remember I think it was a week. It's not funny, but it was like a week later or something, or maybe it was a couple days later. He just goes, "I just want to let you know that I really hate that you stole my childhood from me."
Oh no!
It's like I can't look at things without.
I mean, was like
being sad,
like in a serious way, or he was being a funny guy?
No, he was being serious.
Wow.
And because the crazy thing was, then the next year he went. Yeah, so he must have been like 16 because the next year they went to Washington D.C.
Uh-oh.
And after that he started kind of looking into some of the stuff, and I would send him things, and he was like, he was better, he'd gone through his morning point.
Yeah.
But he was just like, it's like, dude, I feel like I cannot even enjoy this trip.
Yeah.
It's like I am so off balanced. I am off centered right now.
Yeah.
I can't. It's just you can't not see it everywhere.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, it's fascinating and it's true, and that's an interesting thing that we all kind of have to go through. I mean, I could see somebody asking the question, is it even worth knowing, given the trauma that it can hit somebody with, not to mention potential obsession Not to mention social ostracization. Not to,
Maybe.
yeah, I think that's it. Not to mention, everything that goes along with that. Not to mention, what it might do with your own relationships with people that, you're in relationship with. Now you're suddenly the crazy conspiracy guy, and, it can have an effect. And I think maybe more people than we think who haven't done it right, it can really screw some people up. But it does beg if somebody was going to ask the question, is it even worth knowing or sharing? What would you say?
Matthew 24, when the disciples, they want to start talking about eschatology.
Oh,
and
boy.
They say, so Lord, tell us what it's going to be like. And the first thing that Jesus says is, do not be deceived. And then everything else, then of course the rest of Matthew chapter 24.
Yeah.
But that's where he starts. Just don't be deceived.
Just don't do it.
When we talk about these things, when these things are brought up, there is such a possibility to be drawn away, to forget your first love, to forget the real purpose in Christ's mission. Just don't be deceived. Don't be deceived into thinking exposing Bohemian Grove is more important than the gospel.
Mm.
It is important to simply not be deceived, right?
Yeah.
So when, that Proverbs 7 woman comes over and says, hey, let's go hang out at Bohemian Grove, you say, no, I know things about that place and I'm not going to go. I shall not be deceived.
Right.
And as soon as you say shall to a girl that's trying to, then that's it. They don't want to talk to you anymore.
It's the perfect weapon.
It is.
Or defense.
Yes.
Defense against girls. I shall not go to Bohemian Grove. Well, you make a great point. I mean, it's interesting as somebody who's spent so long talking about this stuff in so many depths, some of which I don't even want to return to. It is a question that needs to be brought up, or else you do lose certain aspects of joy in your life. And I think you presented it perfectly, which is you got to keep number one, which is Jesus. And then the rest you just got to balance out in your life. I mean, certainly some people, their mission is to expose Bohemian Grove, for example.
Yeah.
But that doesn't have to be everybody's mission.
No, it does
and
not.
I think some people will survive and be happy and stuff if they don't know every detail about Bohemian Grove. Maybe know enough not to show up when you're invited, but I don't know. It's an interesting question that I recently had. I mean, it's been posed once or twice throughout the years here. A lot of even Christians are like, who cares? I don't even care. It's just Jesus, which is you can't say no to that, but
it's true. But the thing is that if Jesus didn't want us to be here and still be in the world, he would have taken us.
Right.
At the point of salvation, it's like, oh, you've had enough. Come home.
Right.
He wants us to still be here. So sometimes those things do bump up with reality, and there's a reason that you have looked into this. So, for instance, I recently came back from Uganda, and I had a conversation with the pastors there. Actually, I think I was talking with the pastor's wife, and because it was in the context of talking about, I think it was just healthcare.
Uh-huh.
They were just talking about women in the villages and things like that. And I brought up, has the Gates Foundation been in this area?
Mm.
And all of a sudden I was like, why have I not brought this up before?
Right.
I was like, yeah, if they come around here and want to inject you with stuff, don't go.
Interesting.
It's bad. And she said, "Oh, she's like, yeah, when they come around, most of the women, they just leave. They just go out into the bush,
Wow.
or and she was just kind of talking about it. And she says, no, we don't. And I was like, I would strongly encourage you not to trust them,
Yeah.
not trust what they say.
Wow. That's pretty heavy.
And I was like, that's real life, right?
Yeah.
That's a legitimate warning at that point, that if I didn't say something, then it's almost like, well, why didn't you talk about it?
Right.
Why didn't you bring it up? It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I should. That is in context and should be discussed.
Yeah. I mean, that's a direct consequence too.
Absolutely.
Wow. That's really interesting. I mean, that does put a whole kind of new spin on a lot of things. A lot of this stuff does have direct consequences to people in our lives. Especially when you start talking about the media and, television and everything, the fact that television is like a patented brainwashing device and blah blah, all this kind of crazy stuff. I mean, oh, hi Monty. That does have, I mean, that's real world stuff. Those are the types I mean, maybe trying to wake somebody up to 9/11, would have some sort of direct consequence, if not just an important worldview shift for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, if you're talking about television, even I'll just stick on that example for now. Vaccines in some cases certainly should at least be discussed, and that choice should be made with, having observed all the evidence.
Yeah.
And, it's those types of things that actually do affect people.
Or just so many people are unwilling to have discussions anymore.
That's what I find frightening.
And absolutely, everybody just, as soon as so someone brings it up in the group, and everybody's like, oh, here we go, and they start loading their meme cannons.
Yeah.
And they start just firing away at everybody, and it's all emotional sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's hard to actually discuss.
Here's an interesting, this is a conversation I had recently with somebody I'm very close to, and it's not even conspiratorial. It's just, this is what happened. It was flu season, and my buddy was talking about getting a flu shot, and I'm like, oh no, I'm not going to get a flu shot. He's like, what? Why not? And my family line, something genetically responds really poorly to flu shots, and has even caused death in my family.
Wow.
Not my direct family, but we have a history of that. I'm like, oh no, I don't do it. It just kind of just is bad genetically for me. It's just, we have bad history with that. And then he took that, which I wasn't trying to give him like the vaccine talk. I'm just like, oh no, just like genetically and historically, my family responds poorly to that, and it's within even the stated warnings on the flu shot. There's certain percentage of people, like, that's really, really dangerous. Not just infants and old people. And he immediately took that as, oh, I'm an anti-vaxxer, which I may or may not be, but that wasn't even the conversation I was trying to have. But it was a trigger that just exploded into this entire conversation that was really unfortunate. But, people are certainly triggered just at the very whiff of, some things that go against the official story.
Yeah, and I think too easy, it becomes the argument.
Yeah.
Instead of just letting them work through it.
Right.
The thing is for all of us, we worked through it. And it's almost not fair to have the expectation that someone's going to you're going to give your argument and they're just going to believe it.
Yeah. I don't think it's ever happened in the history of human existence.
No, it's not going to work out that way. And I think that, and I think this is true with most kind of conversations that you have anyway, the more questions you ask, the better.
Yeah.
There's a story. When I was in school, I was a missions major, and I thought I would be out in the, island, some island of Papua New Guinea or something.
Right.
But I listened to a missionary, and he talked about that when they were first there, and they could have just started immediately attacking the spirits, the spirit world, their practices, all those things, and instead they walked around and they just asked questions. So they'd have this little shrine, and they'd put little offerings of fruit or something in it. And you notice that every time they were going to put new fruit in it, or whatever it was, I can't remember now what it was, they would have to take the old one out and put the new one in.
Mm-hmm.
And he watched them, kind of finish doing that. And he said, have they ever come and taken it out of there? They're like, what? Have the spirits ever come and actually taken your offerings? I said, no. He said, oh. And just ask questions. Well, what about this thing? Has that ever happened? Do you ever see this? They wouldn't answer it.
Yeah.
Just ask the question.
Yeah.
And those kind of questions fester. And they then have the inner conversation themselves. You do that enough, and someone else is going to be launched on their own journey to find truth. And I think if we have more conversations like that, let's just ask the questions.
Yeah. That's a great point. I mean, I think that's the most valuable way. If it's in your heart to share things like this, you could lay out all the evidence, and it's not, it'll might create some tension in the room, and you may or may not be friends afterwards. But even just asking the question like, well, why don't you believe 9/11? Well, because the government says this happened. Like, well, why do you believe them? Well, because why would they want to hurt me? Yeah. Well, right. Why would they want to hurt you? I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then you just got to play the long game, like Jesus played the long game.
Absolutely. I think that's the expectation can't be that they're somehow going to snap out of it immediately.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe our expectation for some reason.
Now, Nicolai, here's a question I think everybody has been wondering this entire conversation. And that is, why in the world do you hate monkeys so much?
Well, I mentioned briefly I was a missions major, and going to school, I had opportunity to go to a lot of different places.
Uh-huh.
And I ended up going to India for 3.5 months or so.
Okay.
Just doing things over there.
Yeah.
And
missionary things?
Helping with an NGO.
Yeah, okay.
Over there.
That works.
And
some humanitarian stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
And there were monkeys that lived in the city. I don't know. I was in Delhi. I was in the heart of the city.
Okay.
And there are, if you've ever been to India, there are still animals everywhere. There's monkeys and cows and donkeys and elephants just running all over the place.
Nice.
And the monkeys are out of control. The monkeys are pests. People have locks. They lock their doors and windows. They have bars on their windows, not for, burglars, but for monkeys.
Wow.
They have locks on their refrigerators because of monkeys. Because they'll come in and they'll just throw everything in your fridge all over the place. They love eggs. It's like eggs now start like egging people and things, and they will kill babies in their cribs.
Oh no.
They are horrible menaces.
Yeah.
And I grew to hate them.
Yeah.
Not because of monkeys and what monkeys are, but just how they act and everything that they do and everything about them. But not just
you don't
hate them.
You don't hate them for being monkeys. You hate them for doing monkeyish things.
Right. Exactly. that's and they would turn my water pump on all the time because they had a manual pump on my building.
Yeah.
And it would burn out the motor, so then I wouldn't have water. And so, to them I say, "Fie on you, monkeys! Fie on you."
That's hilarious. So you said you were a major in missionary stuff, and you obviously been to Uganda, you've been to Delhi. So is this what you're spending all your time doing now? Have you settled down? Are you just back home being a preacher man, or are you still doing missions work?
So for years, I had it very settled in my heart that I was willing to go and I would go anywhere. And when I went off to college,
Mm-hmm.
I think my parents knew that's where I was at, and that they partly didn't expect me to come home.
Oh, interesting.
I would go to school, and then I would go directly onto the mission field.
Right.
So I wanted to be a church planner and do those things, and so I got to go. I still haven't gone to South America. That's the last one.
Yeah.
But been around all over the place, and when people are like, oh, that call to go, and I'd already kind of had it settled in my heart that I was going somewhere.
Yeah.
The Lord actually had to work in my heart to say it's okay to stay.
Interesting.
It's okay to stay where you're at.
Yeah.
And it took a lot for the Lord to do that. And there was lots of opportunities and things that I was not able to take, and different things I wasn't able to do. And I ended up coming back to this area and getting entrenched in ministry. And you have that opportunity, and you recognize that the thing God has for you right now is more important than an opportunity, because you're actually doing it. And so you stay, and you stay because of relationships, and you stay because of people. And that's the best reason to do anything, is because of the relationship piece.
Right. Well,
that's also a good reason to go too.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. Yeah. It's interesting because, I've met quite a few missionaries who kind of just have done the same thing. And I've just always I've always wondered what the shift is, or what changes that. Obviously, I went to a Christian college, and a lot of people there were kind of the same people. I thought they would just disappear and be off in the jungle forever. And then, I've been out of college for quite a while now, and there's a couple of them who, settled down, had some families, and work a couple night shifts at IKEA during the week.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, for me, it was, and even when my wife and I were just married, we still were talking about, where might we go, and we had opportunities to do some pretty cool things, and it didn't really pan out. For a while, I thought I would go back to Denmark as a missionary.
Yeah.
Because I have a Danish passport. It's easy for me just to go back. I don't have to worry about any of those things.
There you go.
So I was like, I'm just going to go back and do that. We even did a exploratory trip. We did a scouting trip to sort of pick an area, pick a city.
Right.
And we even did that and came back, and then the team fell apart.
Oh.
Not everybody who was on the team actually wanted to continue going. I was like, okay, well, I'm convicted to not go alone and to go just as, so I guess we're not doing that. And then we ended up, at the church we're at now, and, just kind of recognize that there were things that the Lord had for us to do there. And I think my perspective on missions is a little bit different. Even as a missions major when I was in school, I had that weird epiphany moment where I was like, there's no such thing as missions. There's only church ministry. And it just so happens that some people do it in a language they don't understand yet. It's like you're doing the same thing.
Yeah. No,
you're
that's
just
good.
doing it somewhere else.
That's good.
So
did you have no, continue, please.
No, I had friends who were very convicted. I'm going to this place.
Yeah.
I'm going to graduate and go there. And I never had that. I never had a place.
Interesting.
So that was, just wherever.
Hey, that's awesome. So you're doing missions wherever you are. You're just happy to be doing it in a language that you understand.
It's easier, It's easier to do. But recently, we went to Uganda, and my wife and I went, before we were married, we went to Uganda about 7 years ago or so. And
right.
The cool thing is we sort of maintained a relationship there, and there's some folks that have continued going, and we ended up going back, and I think we're going to continue going back to this place. I might end up going there more often now.
Yeah.
Once a year or so, may end up doing that. But yeah, I mean, what the Lord is doing now is He's given me a passion for training, church leaders, and for just training church leaders to train church members as though they were church leaders. Does that make sense?
It does, and that's awesome.
Like every believer should be a theologian because we love God.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. Well, that's awesome, man. I'm really stoked to hear that you've gone through sort of that development, I guess, is what I would consider it, of, our mission and our passions and our destinies. I feel they're all in constant development within us in our relationship with God. And, it's just such an exciting thing when you get to the next step, whatever that may be. So sounds like you got a good thing going on. We're coming up on 2 hours here. Now, is there something that you just had burning on your heart to talk about, something you want the world to know?
I think one of the things that I think I see as a opportunity for just the church in general, is to engage with people where they're at. And I don't mean to just go to a coffee shop and pick somebody. But I think we as believers too often pull ourselves out of the culture that they're in. And it's definitely something that we do as, folks who would be more on the fringy side of Christianity. We do that all the time. We're trying to grab people and pull them into our fringy world. Yeah. Instead of going into theirs. And I honestly think that we need to engage people where they are getting their worldviews built. I think we need to go to the movies more.
You mean just go to the movies?
I think that those films, because there's a difference between a movie and a film, right?
Yeah, of course.
So there are those films, right, that really do shape people's worldviews. And they're not reading philosophy. They're not reading, these opinion papers from, professors in some university. Very few are, but they're going to the movies.
Right.
And I think that culture is happening all around us, and there's well springs of just cascading philosophy that's just pouring through our culture and goes swirling all around, and we're not engaging with it. It's just happening around us, and we're not a part of it, and we're not engaging with it at all. And so I think it's almost like we're talking a different language sometimes.
Yeah.
When we talk to people.
Yeah. No, that's an excellent point. I mean, it's hard if you haven't you wouldn't go into the mission field without having some sort of idea of what the culture's like, or what the language is, or, what sort of metaphor speaks to these, this type of person, or things like that. It's really a lesson in communication more than anything else.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, evangelism really is just being honest with people.
Yeah.
So someone says, dude, why are you so happy all the time? Like, I don't know, I'm going to heaven. Wouldn't you be happy?
Yeah.
And just be honest about it. Don't say, well, I just had a great morning.
A lot of coffee.
Yeah. What'd you do this weekend? Oh, I hung out with some friends.
Yeah.
Behind some stained glass.
Yeah. I remember when I was working at the church with Gons, it was like, I'd have to be there on Sunday, and it would always be, not always, but there were certain people where they would ask, like, oh, what are you doing this weekend? Like, oh, just working. I got to call church work, so it was like an easy out of a conversation if I didn't, which is, that's my own shortcoming, but
But you do the opposite when you're in Christian college. You call normal things by spiritual things. So you just always refer to your bed as the Word. Like, just gonna go spend some time in the Word. Just go take a nap.
Yeah, that's a good one. We weren't that clever.
Okay.
Except for we just called everything fellowship.
Oh yes.
Yeah, everything's fellowship. Just fellowshipped.
Yeah, I echo that experience.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. Hey, all right. So I got a few more questions for you here, and we'll close out unless you have a lightning strikes your brain and you can teach us more. It was kind of fun having a pastor on the show. This is good times. So now you mentioned what? You had a dog? One dog?
We have one dog.
One dog. One male dog.
One male dog.
Tell me about him. Her.
His name is Murphy.
Murphy.
But if you ask my oldest what his name was, for a while it was in flux. It was Jester, and then it was Murphy, and then we asked her one day, it was Mr. Jester McMurphy. All of a sudden became his name.
That's a good one.
It's like, oh, we just throw them all together. We got him from the shelter, and he came with a name.
Yeah.
So then we renamed him, and then she was, I think, she was switching back and forth. He's the perfect dog for our family. I've got 3 little girls, a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 2-year-old, and he takes the most punishment I've seen from any dog.
What kind of dog is he?
He's like an Opsolopso, whatever you could say. I don't remember.
I have no idea what that is.
It's a little white dog. Have you seen the Goldbergs?
No.
Okay.
A little white dog, like a little poodle thing?
Looks like a little white dog.
Okay.
You know the front of the food, I don't remember what it's like a picture of a dog that's on some dog food.
Okay.
But anyway, yeah, a little white dog. He's got the long hair, so he doesn't have fur. Which is nice.
Oh, he's kind of like the weird crazy hair dog.
Kind of, but he's mixed with something else, so he doesn't look like he's got long, luscious locks.
Yeah. All right. So he takes the punishment. He's good for the kids. He doesn't snap.
He's good for the kids. He only snaps if they're actually hurting him.
Oh yeah.
But he would never actually nip or hurt anybody.
Yeah.
He just wants to know what's going on. He puts up a big show though.
Yeah. Well,
squirrels and
those little dogs.
They do.
They got to take it where they can get it.
If you wake him up in the middle of the night, it takes him a while for him to actually wake up. So, yeah.
That's adorable.
But as soon as he finally it's just a person here, he'd probably just lick a burglar to death.
So what about something that I recently, I have to admit to you and the rest of the listeners, I've kind of been letting my juicing game go. So, I just want to be upfront about that and just like share my struggles with everybody. What about you? You on your health game? You work out?
No.
You got to keep that body in tip-top condition.
I've told my wife recently that, my temple has been under an expansion project for the past 10 years, and we're just about done, I think.
I bet you're a real hoot on the pulpit there, Nicolai.
If the joke drops, you just keep on going.
Just keep on going.
Don't explain it. Someone will laugh.
Yeah, people need to be taught that lesson. All right, so you're just taking it easy, just casual existence.
I tell you what, my this is the excuse, of course, right?
Yeah, sure.
My job is I work a lot at my day job.
Yeah,
and I'm honestly so beat. When I get home, it's my excuse, but I'm just so tired. And they feed us at work. Sometimes I eat multiple meals at work, and of course they're not as healthy as they could be.
Right.
They do have healthy options, but they're always just don't taste as good as the other stuff. So
hey, you gotta tongue's number one, man.
Yep.
I get it.
No, but my wife and we're gonna start doing the Whole30 thing, because I guess if we don't, we're in trouble.
Yeah, you're just gonna pass away. You're gonna go into a long sleep,
I guess.
Whole30, that's an interesting thing. We could have actually spent a long time talking about Whole30. I recently did it.
How was it?
I did it, and it was fantastic. I did it. I just got to the end of the 30 and just kept doing it. I did 63 days.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know what the Whole30 is, it's basically just, I don't know, another one. It's kind of like paleo. If you've heard of paleo, it's very similar to paleo. Kind of just keep away from the dairy, the breads, the sugar,
The tough part's the peanuts.
Yeah, no peanuts. Weird.
See, I love me some peanuts.
Or beans. I mean, you can't.
Beans?
Well,
that was weird, right?
Yeah, there's certain. You can have green beans. And again, we're not going to turn this into a 2-hour conversation, but it's interesting. It's a very specific thing, but it totally works. It totally works. You're going to love it.
What was your objective? How do you know that it works?
Actually, Sam Swanson from the former God's Property Radio and Hallelujah podcast told me about it. And, I was just getting a little thick around the edges and decided to try it out. And he said, it's like a guaranteed 25 pounds if you make it through the 30 days.
Nice. So I've done juice fasts before.
Yeah.
And have had similar things. It'd be nice to actually chew things and get similar results.
Well, that's the great thing about this is you actually start to lose your desire for cheese and bread and everything like that. And I guess it's not too much of a surprise, but you feel great. You're eating meats and salads, and they recently added potatoes. You can have potato. I mean, you don't even really notice you're missing anything by the end of it. I mean, I would for dinner have there was one day for lunch, breakfast, and dinner I had eggs, bacon, potatoes. Yeah, eggs, bacon, and potatoes. All 3 meals. Woke up the next day a pound lighter. It was crazy.
It's awesome.
Yeah,
it's great.
It's a good time. Give it a try.
I will. Yeah. I think I will, Basil.
That's just what I do. I'm here to change lives. Changing lives and making the world a better place.
It's super great.
So, I'll put my, I wouldn't say stamp of approval, but I'll have a conversation about that with anybody. You just hit me up. We'll talk about the whole 30.
Sounds good.
All right. Sounds good. Are you a happy man?
I am. I really have a lot of reasons to be joyful. I'm so thankful for my family and just what the Lord's doing. I mean, how could you not be happy?
Amen.
Honestly, how could you not be happy with what the Lord has promised us?
Hey, if you just pay a little bit of attention, there's nothing to be unhappy about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's not to take away from unhappy experiences, but life continues, and there's always happiness right around the corner.
I think we just need to be reminded sometimes.
Amen.
Which is why you should listen to this show.
Yeah, thank you for helping me remind everybody.
Thank you.
All right,
Thanks
buddy.
for having me on.
Absolutely. So, I'm still having trouble with this. I'm so used to giving people a chance to plug something. Do you have like a Facebook or a YouTube channel or something you want to get out there?
I don't have those things.
Do you have a missionary support page?
I may soon.
Oh, well,
but not now.
That would have helped you. Yeah.
It would have helped me a whole lot. I think one thing I would just encourage everybody to do is to just remember that our focus needs to be Jesus. It's fun to talk about these things sometimes, especially when you find someone else who also likes to talk about fringy things. But there are people who need to know Jesus first before they know the truth about everything else, because what is the point if they agree with you on these things but they don't know Jesus?
Amen. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Nicolai, and thanks for those tickets to the prophecy conference.
Absolutely. You can thank my brother-in-law.
I will. It'll be in a fruit basket.
Oh, awesome.
All right, buddy. Well, you have a great night, and hey, we'll keep in touch.
Sounds good. Have a good night, Basil.
Later, buddy.
Bye.
Well, there you have it, folks. Hope you enjoyed that. I really did. I thought it was very insightful and interesting to talk to a clergyman, and just an all-around great guy. And I hope you guys are enlightened and edified, and just enjoyed that so much. I just want to remind everybody, the bonus content going up on the Patreon page. So head over to patreon.com/The Joyspiracy Theory. Have your furry friend sponsor an episode of The Joyspiracy Theory by signing up there. And you'll also get access to the super cool bonus content with my partner, Gons, regarding his new baby. So that'll be fun. Hey, if you guys haven't already, and I know there are some of you who have not, please consider leaving a rating and a review on iTunes or YouTube or just Stitcher or wherever you're doing it. Everybody has their own system, but if you take advantage of that, it really helps out the show. It tells other people how cool the show is and how much it will change their lives. It's life-changing. Anyways, so do that. A rating is like stars. You can leave 1 star or 5 stars, or I think 4 stars is the highest in most ways. Anyways, if you liked it, good. Leave 4 stars. If not, bad. Leave 1 star. I'd prefer if you didn't, but just follow your heart as far as that goes. Reviews. You can leave a review. It really helps out. Tell people why, what's up. If you liked it, you can be like, the Joyspiracy Theory is kind of like the first day of spring. It's refreshing and warm, and it makes the flowers bloom. Thanks, Basil. That would be a really sweet one. Somebody can do that. I'm just going to start dictating what people should review. All right. We've got a Facebook page, The Joyspiracy Theory, where you can get all sorts of posts as well as just things that'll brighten up your day. All sorts of day brighteners. So go do that. Also, all these episodes get put on YouTube. You can go follow the Joyspiracy Theory YouTube channel. There's a bunch of stuff up there. Leave some likes and some comments. That'd be great. It really helps out the show. You guys don't even know. So thank you very much. All right. So we're going to have another episode next week. Hope you guys are enjoying this. But make sure to come back because, when the flowers start a-blooming and the happy's in the air. That was bad. That was a really bad tagline. But if you guys have a better idea for a tagline, you can go to the joyspiracytheory.com and there's going to be a little tab on the side. I've been forgetting to mention this over the past few episodes, but if you go to the joyspiracytheory.com, on the side of the page there's going to be a little tab that says send a voice message. Go do that. Send me a voice message. Let me know what you think a better tagline is, because I'm obviously not very good at it. So go do that. You'd really be helping out the show, and you're technically a podcast host at that point. All right, go do that. Go. All right, guys. Bye.